Apollo 13, the successful failure.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In there.
30 seconds.
18 feet, coming down at 2. He's got it made. Come on in there. 24 feet. Contact light.
Roger, copy contact.
Drop. Pro.
With the triumphs of the Apollo 11 and 12 missions, the Apollo 13 was set to be the third spacecraft to be sent to the moon. This time, the spacecraft was set to explore the Fra Mauro region. The crew originally consisted of Commander James A. Lovell Jr., Lunar Module Pilot Fred W. Hayes Jr., and Command Module Pilot Ken Mattingly. However, days before the mission, the backup Lunar Module Pilot Charles Duke exposed the crew to German measles. Command Module Pilot Ken Mattingly had no immunity to German measles, causing him to be replaced by the backup Command Module Pilot John Swigert Jr. The spacecraft was launched on April 11, 1970 at 2:13 p.m. The first 2 days started off with minimal issues. On duty, Capsule Commander Joe Kerwin even said, "The spacecraft is in real good shape as far as we are concerned. We're bored to tears down here." Little did he know, tragedy was about to strike. Nine minutes after signing off a TV broadcast, the crew heard a loud bang, which was an explosion of one of the oxygen tanks. This caused the other oxygen tank to fail. The command module lost electricity, light, and water, while also being 200,000 miles away from the Earth.
The flight of the Apollo 13 to the moon is in serious jeopardy this morning and is not going to make a moon landing. As the Apollo 13 was some 205,000 miles from Earth, speeding toward its rendezvous with the moon scheduled for tomorrow night, the fuel cells that supply it with electrical power suddenly failed.
John Swigert then radioed over to Mission Control in Houston, the famous line, "Houston, we've had a problem here." Warning lights then came on, signaling loss of the spacecraft's fuel cells. 13 minutes after the explosion, James Lovell looked out the window and reported to Houston that there was oxygen from the tank leaking into space. First, the crew tried to close off the leak with the hatch between the command and lunar modules. The hatch would not stay shut, which made the crew realize that this wasn't a cabin leak. With only 15 minutes of power left in the command module, the crew headed into the lunar module. Power in the lunar module was also an issue, considering that there was only 20%. Another concern was water. Water was expected to run out 5 hours before returning to Earth. On top of this, carbon dioxide removal was an issue. There were enough canisters to remove the carbon dioxide, but they were not compatible with the spacecraft. The astronauts had to get creative to deal with this dilemma. They used cardboard, plastic bags, and lots of tape to attach the carbon dioxide canisters to the lunar module removal system. After resolving this, the next big question was how the astronauts were getting back home. The plan was that since the spacecraft was still taking its normal course to the moon, when they arrived, they would use whatever energy they had left to turn the spacecraft around and angle it towards the Earth. This was a very tough task, but the plan was successful, and the astronauts were able to turn the spacecraft around. Later, it had been 3 days since the explosion, and the astronauts were getting ready for re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. First, the astronauts had to recharge the batteries in the command module. The biggest problem was that they didn't know how much power they needed, since they could overcharge the batteries. Also, even with fully charged batteries, they could still run out of energy before the return. Finally, the time then came for the spacecraft power-up sequence, which was a risky move, doing it so late before re-entry into the atmosphere. Luckily, John Swigert was able to perform the power-up successfully with no mishaps.
We're now coming to the moment, the last moments of Apollo 13, as it comes in, as it begins its re-entry. The best thing we can do now is just to listen and hope.
The last few seconds down to re-entry. At this point, there's very little anybody can do, including the astronauts, except wait as they come in through the up uppermost fringes of the Earth's atmosphere. The computers put them on course. All anybody can do now is cross their fingers.
As the spacecraft entered the atmosphere, the radio signal was cut off. All Mission Control could do now was sit and wait.
Apollo Control, Houston, we've just had loss of signal from Honeysuckle.
After waiting for a while, a rescue plane was able to pick up signals of the Apollo 13. Then, Mission Control saw parachutes pop out of the Apollo 13 from their TV screens.
There they are!
There they are. They've made it.
All three chutes out. Listen to the crowd on the boat.
Yeah, in the mains, it really looks great.
And they've landed the right way up. A helicopter going in there to drop a flare for the wind direction for the other helicopters. Look at the heat scarring on the side of that module.
The astronauts had made it out alive. Excitement broke out in Mission Control, rejoicing that the astronauts were home safe. The astronauts were reunited with their families and homes, all thanks to Mission Control. Overall, much was learned from the Apollo 13 mission. Scientists found out that the explosion was caused by improvements on the command module. The heaters on the oxygen tanks were changed from 28 volts to 65 volts. This caused major damage to the tank after 8 hours of overheating, which would create a bomb the next time it was filled with oxygen. This helped scientists understand why the tank exploded. Although this mission had many mishaps and tragedies, it was filled with triumphs at the same time.